welcome back to the Queens of the Damned podcast. This week, we are missing Rachel, and it is really sad, but it's also a happy moment because Rachel did have her son. So, huge congratulations to Rachel. We're super excited for her, but this also does mean that we're going to lose her for a little while, which is really sad. We're really going to miss her so much.
She's going to jump back in when she's feeling a little bit less overwhelmed and a little more settled with everything.
So, also in other news, though, Stephen King's birthday was last week, so we have decided, it was his 70th birthday, so we have decided to just make this a Happy Birthday Stephen King episode, and we're going to talk about our favorite, or I guess I should say, the scariest short stories that we've read by him. And it just so happens that we ended up picking short stories from the same book, and the book we picked them from was Night Shift. Which is funny, because all of his short story collections are fantastic, and it just so happens we both picked ones from the same book.
His first short story collection, way back in the 70s, I think. So almost 40 or so years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So for those who haven't read the short story collection called Night Shift, it has stories like Graveyard Shift, which actually, the movie was called Night Shift, so the film about rats. And then Children of the Corn is in this one. A lot of famous ones. Sometimes They Come Back, I believe, is one of his famous ones. The one that I picked isn't necessarily a famous one, but it was kind of turned into a famous novel. Do you prefer his novels or his short stories?
That's a really difficult question to answer. I think there's a couple of novels that are really my favorite. Like, if I had to pick a favorite short story and a favorite novel, I feel more passionate about the novel, but I also appreciate what he's doing in his short stories, and especially in this collection, that he's exploring. You can see him just starting to form all the little tropes that are so unique to Stephen King, that he's starting to exercise all of those, and it's really fun to watch him, like, start building up this magic spell that he's going to be using for the next 50 years or so.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about his short stories, too, is that he's, like, to me, I think he's such a concise writer. I mean, and on writing, he even says, like, put every single word on trial, which he definitely does. He's very clear on what he says. And I think in his short stories, that really shines. He gets so much across in sometimes just a couple pages. I mean, it's incredible. And his short stories almost always leave me with, like, this almost like a punch in the face, and then you're left like, oh my god, what just happened? So I personally love them. I think he does his best work in them. I think he prefers writing them too, actually.
Oh, I don't know. I never forget them. That's for one thing. As I was going back through Night Shift because I knew we had both chosen stories from this, and kind of just looking at the summaries of those plots. And I just, every time I read one, I was like, yeah, I definitely remember that. He kind of puts these unforgettable ideas into play.
Yeah. Every short story in Night Shift has, like, the same feeling. It's just, like, everything is so creepy in it. To me, it feels different from the other stuff he's written, but at the same time, I agree with you. Like, he was, like, building towards where he wanted to go and everything, but it just feels so different, and it's just creepy and uncomfortable is kind of the feeling that I got from all the short stories in this one. So I picked Jerusalem's Lot from Night Shift, which is actually the first short story in the book. He gets a lot done in those 35 pages, which I think is truly incredible. And his writing style in it is very Lovecraftian. I think he was really going for Lovecraft in it. I almost feel like he was reading Lovecraft while he was writing it, because it's so Lovecraft. And it's written in these letters that the main character is writing to a friend of his. And this main character has moved into an ancestral home of his family's, and people around town are kind of saying to him, you know, that they don't trust the house, that he's evil, that ever since he moved in, bad things have been happening in town, and he's trying to delve into it and figure out what's going on. So there's, like, this little town that's adjacent to the town that he lives in called Jerusalem's Lot, and it's entirely abandoned. Everybody kind of shuns the town, says it's evil, and again, he's trying to get to the bottom of it to figure out what's going on. He visits this town, and he enters a church. It has been transformed into what appears to be like satanic worship. It's all thrown to pieces. There's this creepy book in the middle of the church. There's no windows. There's only oil lamps. Oh my god. As I recount this and as I was reading it, all I could think of was the rats in the walls. The Lovecraft story that I did for the haunted house, which it's pretty much that. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but they go down in the cellar of the house because they're hearing noises this whole time in the walls, and people are saying, oh, it's just rats, and everybody else is saying, no, it's not rats, doesn't sound like rats. Well, they go down the cellar, they find the place that one of his ancestors had killed themselves in, and he sees apparitions, and he passes out. The main character's unconscious for a while. Well, they eventually make it back to Jerusalem's lot, and they go back into this church, and they realize that the main character is what was needed for whatever evil was in this church to break free. And so when he enters the church and he tries to take the book, it's weird how it's described, because I remember when I first read it, I thought it was just like a giant worm that kind of broke through the floor of this church. But it's pretty much just described as like this black jelly-like substance. So I'm guessing something covered in that just kind of emerges from the floor and disappears. And so there's this giant hole in the floor, and the man who had started all of this crawls out of the floor as well, this hole in the ground, and he's just like a skeleton. And then that's when our main character leaves, and he leaves his buddy behind to die, basically. And in the end, he's talking about, I'm gonna end it. I have to kill myself. I'm the last line. I'm the only one that can end all of this. And so he kills himself. And then you find out at the end that no, there was a bastard son. He is now living in the same house that our main character was. And so he's probably going to repeat everything that had just happened. And that's just a really quick recount. The first time I read this, I was a junior in high school. So probably 3 years ago about. So it had been a long time, but I remember when I first read this, it like shook me. It scared me half to death, and I'm not sure, because when I read it this time, I didn't have that same feeling, probably because I knew what was coming. I don't know what it was, but it terrified me to death, and I was doing research to figure out if the book that was in this was real, and I never found anything on it. I don't know. The way that it's described, it just feels real.
So in this Gothic book we were reading for class, they talk about this religious text that is just all vague. It's not the Bible, it's not the Torah, it's not anything. Mm-hmm. And they just kind of gloss over it. But it's instrumental in making one of the early characters' religious ideations. I wonder if he's just kind of using that Gothic trope. It's interesting to think that, like, there's no actual origin of it. Mm-hmm. But I know that you were talking about Lovecraft and how it may have been influenced by Lovecraft, and then I was kind of making that other tie, so I guess the assumption is just that he's read so much classic horror and Gothic literature, which kind of feeds into, he uses everything, cherry-picks it for his purpose, which I love so much.
This was very much so Rats in the Walls. It felt to me like he might have read Rats in the Walls, and he was like, how can I get this across without doing this? I haven't heard anybody trying to say he's ripped off Lovecraft, so I think he did it successfully.
I think in the horror genre especially, everything that comes later is informed by what came before. You can't take that next step. I mean, it's like, think about your basement steps. If there are 3 missing, you can't take the next step.
Right.
It's kind of that way in genre because it historically builds, and, like, authors build off of each other. And speaking of Stephen King, I always remembered, whenever I get worried about, like, something being original, an idea that I had, I think about Stephen King saying, there is a central idea bin from which everything comes, and it's okay to borrow from it, you know, so... He's just doing it well, you know?
Yeah.
I think Einstein said something about plagiarism as well. As far as stealing, like, overall ideas, he's basically has the same sentiment of, like, once an idea is out there, it kind of belongs to the culture.
Right.
And then you adapt it. So we originally chose these stories for how much they scared us. So what about that really got you? Like, what aspects of it did?
God, it was the ending of it. And like I said, when I reread it, I didn't have that same feeling. But when I read it the first time, the ending of it he paints the scene extremely well. The way the church is described in this book is terrifying as far as I'm concerned. I mean, in the end, when the main character walks into this church, there is a sacrificed lamb on top of this book. I can't even remember like where this book supposedly came from, but it was written in like Druidic language or something like that. The image of the sacrificed lamb laying on that book, the church just being absolutely destroyed in pieces. There's an upside down cross on the wall, and there is like, I think he describes a painting of Mary and Jesus, except it's like there's demonic creatures in the image. But everything about it is totally the opposite of what you would expect in a church. And he sets that scene so incredibly well. And I think that's what scared me the most when I was reading it. Is I remember sitting in my classroom, like just like holding onto the book, like almost white knuckling the book, reading that ending, like, oh my God. Always his description. It's something that I've always loved his reading for, is his descriptions. He's concise with his wording, and so that means he can say more, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it really does. He is very specific with his wording, and it's very powerful, I think, a lot of the time. I chose The Mangler, which is a story that when I read it scared the pants off me. And now I read it and I think it's cute, like in a great way. I can't say what about it actually got me the first time I read it. I think I was less familiar with the horror genre when I did, so that could have been part of it. But I'm just going to summarize it and kind of comment a little bit. In the beginning of this story, a detective, or a police officer, arrives on the scene of a horrible kind of industrial accident. He knows it's a bad one because the crowd isn't gathered around the scene of the actual accident. They are kind of set apart from it. No one wants to look at it. And he knows that humans have a natural inclination to look at accidents. Well, this one no one wants to see. So he goes in. It's like a laundromat, isn't it? Sort of?
Yeah, it's a laundromat.
It's a laundromat. Someone got sucked into the Hadley Watson Model 6-speed ironer and folder.
Which is, I've never heard of anything that irons and folds. Like, is that actually a thing, or did he make that up?
Okay, look, I don't care if it's gonna kill me. I want one.
But no kidding. No kidding.
I don't know. But this thing in the last month or so has taken on a reputation as the mangler amongst the employees, and this unfortunate lady, she got her arm caught. They couldn't turn it off. She got sucked into it. Fed her through a good 16 feet of rollers. It tried to fold her at the end.
Which, that's the part that got to me, that I was like, oh my God. Oh, that's disgusting.
When you're talking about it, it's hilarious. But when you're reading it, it's not so much hilarious.
Oh, God.
They're going... Someone's in trouble, right? Because the safety bar on this thing is just not working right, and this poor lady died. So they're thinking the owners are going to go to jail and everything. They go to inspect it. It's fine. Nothing's wrong with it. There's no conceivable way that the lady could have gotten caught in it, really.
I think they say the only way that it could have happened is if she literally fell from above. Like,
it's true. If she had fallen from above, then she could have gotten sucked into it, but everyone in the room said she had her feet on the floor. So the state inspector who comes to try to see if everything's in working order doesn't like the machine. Like, there's something wrong about it. He's like, I don't like this thing. I don't know what it is. Then the state inspector goes on to say, well, there's this thing that happened once before. Some lady calls and she had her dog suffocate in her icebox. And she wants it hauled to the dump. So we haul it to the dump, and the next day, this other lady's son is found in there, dead. So I go to take the door off the thing, and when I open it, there are several dead birds in there. He's like, the thing tried to shut on my arm, and I just didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of gets him thinking. So he's telling all this story to his English professor friend. And the friend says, have you ever thought that maybe this thing is haunted? Just like it's a matter of fact sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, no, you're crazy. So then more accidents start happening. People get burned by it. Some guy loses his arm in the machine. And then the friend brings it up again to the police officer. And he says, so you said, like, things like this didn't start happening until this young girl cut herself on the machine and bled on it, right? And he's like, well, no, but, like, what does that have to do with it? And he's like, well, you know, in a lot of, like, demon sacrifices, it requires the blood of a virgin. So then they, like, get this idea in their head that the machine is possessed by a demon and it's trying to get more blood. They explain that this is possible because, again, if 700 monkeys typed for 700 years, one of them would turn out the works of Shakespeare. And they find out that all of these, quote-unquote, accidental sacrifices or ritual things have been fed to the machine. One was a packet of Jell-O, which was horse hooves. One was the blood of the virgin. One was... There are bats living in the laundromat. So one fell in there, and bat's blood is another kind of ingredient.
Mm-hmm.
And then the big thing is belladonna, which they find out that the lady who got eaten by the machine had some medication that had the active ingredients of belladonna in it. So all that had gotten fed into the machine, and it summoned a demon.
The dramatic irony in that moment when, like, the characters are like, oh no, it's fine, there's no way it could get belladonna in it, like, it's fine, it's just, like, this measly little demon, we're just gonna, like, it'll be okay. And then that moment when, like, the reader knows that it summoned a much more intense demon. I love that. I thought it was really effective.
My favorite part is when they go to this poor girl's house and ask her if she's a virgin.
which they would never be able to do. I feel like they could not get away with that.
I feel like that was the most horrifying part of the story as I look back upon it. They don't know the belladonna's in there, but the stipulation is that, you know, without the belladonna, it's obviously some demon related to voodoo, which, sorry, Steven, but this doesn't make sense. Just,
yeah.
I know you have, like, a man-eating machine here, but I don't know. The rules of the universe aren't kind of matching up. I don't know. So they're like, yeah, throw some holy water on that shit. It'll be fine. And they don't know the belladonna's in there, but they say if it is in there, that thing could eat a stack of Bibles for breakfast. Well, guess what? It's in there. So they go to do an exorcism on this laundry machine. And it just gets angry. And it pulls itself out of the concrete. And one of them dies. One of them lights the fuck out of there. Then the story ends with the guy who lives, the police officer. Of course, his hair had gone dead white. Stephen King loves that. He loves using that.
Yeah.
And I love it. And he's trying to call somebody. And they kind of just hear the machine approaching from the distance. And it...
I'm sorry, this ending is just so tragic.
So, presumably, there's no way to stop this laundry machine that really wants to eat everyone, and it's just going to grow stronger and stronger as it glomps its way through town.
That was like my one hang up about this was like I didn't even have a problem with the fact that it was like a demonic laundry machine. My problem was the image of it like clunking down the road with like concrete still attached. All I was thinking to myself was like, why can't they just drive like a bulldozer over it?
If we have to do a deeper analysis of this story, I would say it really encompasses all of our anxieties about doing laundry. Personally, I wait until I have no underwear left.
Oh my god. And this has to be inspired by the fact that he worked at a laundromat for so long. I mean, I'm in the process of reading his memoir, and some of the things that he talks about are so disgusting. He says at one point that, like, they got sheets and towels and stuff like that from hospitals all the time that had blood on them. And by the time he got to them, they had maggots on them. And so he was, like, shoving stuff into these, big washing machines with maggots on them, and he would get maggots on him, and, like, all the disgusting stuff that he had to deal with when he worked at a laundromat. So, I mean, I get it.
I get it, too. I mean, I would say, you just think about the Industrial Revolution and people working in factories back then, and how many horrific accidents happened to people. Children, too.
Yeah.
And kind of, I can see, like, if he's doing anything with this besides his personal experience, it's kind of, like, the disgustingness of just the corporate machine and just, like, people just being used as, as ways to make profit and, like, being fed into the big machine.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty... I guess if the machine wasn't a demon, I would be more on board, because I think it's really unsettling if an inanimate object has some sort of agency. Like that refrigerator. I don't know what's going on with that refrigerator he mentioned. Maybe there's no demon attached to that. Maybe that refrigerator just hates people. That's a scary thought, and it so easily verges on the absurd, but you also never forget it, which has some power to it, I think. You won't forget that story.
And like you said, the idea of it is kind of absurd, but when you're reading it, at least personally, when I read it, it didn't feel absurd while I was reading it. It wasn't until, like, I went, because, like I said, I read this, like, 3 years ago, and then I reread The Mangler, and I went and told my best friend about it, and, like, as I was telling her about it, I started to realize, like, how ridiculous the whole story was. It's just the strangest thing. When you're reading it, you're just kind of, like, you're on board. I think it's a fun story. I thought it was creepy. The only thing that I did not like was that ending. It was just... I think I would have liked it better if, like, the demon escaped the machine and, like, entered somebody, like, possessed a person. I feel like that would have been more daunting than, like, a laundry machine clunking down the road. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it feels like it goes along with demon mythology better than it sticking to a machine.
Yeah. I just don't know what to say.
How far could that thing get? That's all I could think about at the end. Is like, how far is that thing gonna get? Is it gonna, like, break into his house and try to eat him? Like, it's just a machine clunking down the road. He can just walk away. It's not threatening to me at all. A laundry machine coming at you. So
I kind of think the reason the story ended there was because he got to the point where he was like, oh, okay, I don't know how to continue this. Like, where does this go?
Yeah.
But that's the fun of watching a horror writer, like, start to first stretch his limbs. And I think it produces something so much more fun than even an experienced writer at that point could.
Well, I think it says a lot about him that he was able to take a possessed laundry machine and make it as creepy as he did.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to do.
Not an easy feat. Want to talk about it?
Yeah, let's talk about it. I loved it. I thought it was so great. I saw it twice.
I did too. I wanted to see it again at the drive-in, but I never got an opportunity. Hopefully they'll play it again at the drive-in, because I'm dying to see it that way. I didn't know you went and saw it a second time.
Yeah, I took my mom to it, and she really liked it. So, someone brought a newborn baby to our showing.
Oh my gosh.
That was the most disturbing part of the movie the second time.
The second time that I went, I had a little girl, like really young girl, sitting to my right, and a couple of her siblings that were around the same age. And so when I walked in, I was like, oh my God, no. Like, I just want to enjoy this movie. And they were troopers, man. Like, they didn't even scream. That girl maybe, like, jumped a couple times, but oh my God, it was, like, I was so proud of them. It was incredible. And I almost, like, wanted to turn to their mom and be like, good job. Good job. Because I know there's a lot of people that are, like, up in arms about, like, don't bring your kids to see it. But I don't know. I think it's cool. My parents always brought me to R-rated movies and didn't screw me up. I think it's fun. So I always enjoy it, especially when they bring their daughters to horror movies. Like, you really don't see that often. And so I was super happy.
Well, especially, I mean, this movie is about children. It's about preteens. So chances are your preteens aren't any less familiar with the stuff that's going on in that movie than...
God, I can't even, like, put my finger on what was so good about it. I'm probably going to be an unpopular opinion, but I think that Bill Skarsgård was a better Pennywise than Tim Curry.
I think so, too. And I love Tim Curry. I mean, it was silly. Like, Tim Curry's was silly.
His is iconic. Like, he made Pennywise his own, but I think people who read the books, like, wanted Pennywise. They didn't want Tim Curry's version of Pennywise. They, like, wanted Stephen King's version of Pennywise, and I think Bill Skarsgård just, like, freaking nailed it. I mean, he was almost awkward. Like, Pennywise did not know how to communicate with humans correctly, which is what was, like, my favorite part. Like, whenever he was trying to talk to the kids, like, he didn't... Or Georgie, trying to talk to Georgie without being a monster. He didn't know how to do it. You could tell. He was trying so hard to not be a monster, but he was still terrifying, and he couldn't get past the fact that he was like that. I thought that was incredible. I just thought he nailed it.
I loved his balance of, like, dangerousness and fuck-uppedness and, like, silly.
Yeah.
It was so silly. It was so silly, but it was terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's what the role requires, and he totally did it. And his physicality was super... I was super on board with that. I mean, he did that. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows now he can do that with his face. It's a real thing. Yeah. He can also do that thing with his eyes.
I thought it was really cool that they they asked him to look at the camera with one eye and look at the kids with the other eye. I just think... Yeah, I can't. I definitely
I'm,
can't
like, trying to do it now.
And like, I was reading about that, and I guess the directors were like, oh my God, this would be so cool. And Bill Skarsgård was like, yeah, I can do that. And they were totally taken aback. They were like, wait a minute, you can?
It's like not a natural
thing. This is actually going to be a thing?
People aren't supposed to be, like, chameleons. Like, I have a lazy eye, and I can't even force it to do that. So...
Yeah. It's crazy. So, there were a lot of people that were actually complaining about the fact that his eyes were, like, not straight all the time, but to me it was just it was so effective. And I think a lot of people went into this movie expecting, like, Pennywise the clown is the monster, but Pennywise isn't the monster. It is the monster, and Pennywise is just one of the forms that it takes. And so him doing that with his eyes almost, to me, made it seem more of like a meat suit,
Yeah. Ew.
Like everything's not fully put back together. Right. Sort of a thing. You know what I mean? Like, he's not fully articulated, which I really love that. I thought it was really awesome.
That's what makes it worse, is, like... Mm-hmm. I don't want to give much away, but what makes it worse is, like, that sort of... I mean, he's an interdimensional being, right? He's just this...
Yeah.
Kind of conglomeration of all our fears, and sometimes he can't switch back and forth quick enough between those things. Mm-hmm. And therefore he makes something even more grotesque and frightening.
Yeah. He's like and I know they're going to go into it with the second movie, but it is... Which actually there's speculation that it is actually a she.
Oh.
people think that it's a he because Pennywise is a he, but the spider form that it takes, which is the closest to its true form apparently, is female. So there's speculation that it is actually a she. Stephen King has never come out and said it, but anyways, fun fact. But it is, like you said, an interdimensional being, but it's like, it's older than time, but it is younger than Maturin the turtle, the great turtle.
Oh.
And Maturin shows up in, like, I'm sure somebody has counted how many books Maturin has come up in, but he's most well known in the Dark Tower books and in it. And Maturin is, like, has been there even longer than it. It is considered young compared to Maturin. And so I can't remember how it came into being, but, like, it kind of is able to do what it does because Maturin is asleep all the time. And Maturin is supposed to be, like, the force of good, and because the force of good is, I think the whole point is, like, Maturin is not, like, healthy, like, not his full self, and so it can kind of, you know, run around and do what it wants. And so, yeah, its origin on planet Earth is it comes in a comet.
Interesting.
I just wanted to run through that because a lot of people don't know that, and I don't know. They say they're going to go over its origin story in chapter 2, but I'm going to be honest, I don't think they're going to do the true beginning because it's kind of weird. When you're reading it, like, as a Stephen King fan, it's fine, like, you're used to it, but, like, as somebody who's not a Stephen King fan, it's like people would think it was really fucking weird. Yeah. And, like, because all I can imagine is them putting, like, a giant turtle on the screen, and that's not gonna go over well with people.
I'm just looking this up because I've heard this before. This is from Wikipedia, but the origins of the turtle story are uncertain, but it's been recorded since the mid-19th century. The famous version of that story is from Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. So, a well-known scientist, some say it was Bertrand Russell, once gave a public lecture on astronomy, described how the Earth orbits around the sun, and how the sun orbits around the center of a vast collection of stars called our galaxy. At the end of the lecture, a little old lady at the back of the room got up and said, "What you have told us is rubbish. The world is really a flat plate supported on the back of a giant tortoise." And the scientist gave a superior smile before replying, "What is the tortoise standing on?" "You're very clever, young man, very clever," said the old lady, "but it's turtles all the way down."
That's
funny. That's the first thing that I'd heard of that sort of metaphor of, like, the universe and turtles. So it is younger than that great turtle?
That great turtle,
okay.
Yes. Okay, last semester I took a Hinduism class, and personally I think Maturin sounds like Vishnu, because Maturin, I believe he was asleep and he, like, dreamed the world, which is the exact same thing Vishnu does. That's how universes are created, is Vishnu sleeps. He has a celestial sleep, and as he dreams, these bubbles, which are universes, come out of, I think they come out of his navel. So it's kind of, I think, a reiteration of Vishnu, except it's a great turtle. There's turtles everywhere in his books, everywhere. Like, Maturin is one of the guardians of the beams in the Dark Tower, and he shows up everywhere. He's just random turtle references all over the place, and it's, yeah, I don't know. That's why people talk about, like, the Stephen King universe, is because he has literally created a universe that all of these characters live in together. And it's the craziest thing.
God, it's an awful place to be, but so is the world, so it's like, how different. Really?
I mean, but the thing is, like, these are tangible, you know, dangers. I feel like the world we live in is not necessarily, like, tangible dangers. I mean, you don't have, like, a laundry machine coming at you trying to eat you. It's more like they're going to take away my health care and I'm not going to be able to get surgery, or I'm probably going to die, you know? So it's like, I would almost prefer living in that universe, because it's like, I just need an axe.
In it, that you just reiterated, and it's, and I guess if you've read the book, then it's in there, I suppose. But when it's Billy, right? The main character. He's trying to convince Bill. Yeah, he's trying to convince all the kids to go in the house with him. That's the origin of, or the home of it. And he says, I go home and Georgie's not there and I'm scared all the time or something. And he says, so walking into this house, it's easier than walking into my own. And that's kind of like, because it is the manifestation of all of those intangible fears that we can't grasp and we can't conquer, because they're just all parts of life, like disease and growing up, womanhood, and everything. Which, it's what I loved about the movie so much, because it's just like, it encompasses everything that I think the horror genre should encompass. It's supposed to reflect what we're fucking scared of. And it does everything. It just... I don't know. It's
been a long time since I've read a book, like, for hours on end, staying up late, because I'm like an old lady. I can't stay up past midnight. If I stay up until midnight, I won't sleep for some reason. And so, like, I have to be in bed by, like, 11:30 usually. That night, I stayed up until, like, 3 a.m. to finish it, and I bawled for an hour over that book, because it hits so hard, and it's exactly because of what you said. It's like, it's everything that I love in one. I mean, I shouldn't say one little book, it's like a giant freaking book, but in one book, like, everything I love, just, like, right there. And that whole thing with Bill, like, I loved how they did that in the movie, but it kind of bummed me out a little bit that he didn't get as much time to show how bad his home life is. Because in the book, it's very much so described how, like, his parents don't talk to him at all. When Georgie was alive, his family was really close and happy and, like, a normal, loving family. And then after Georgie died, they didn't talk to him. They were more, like, they were almost angry with him all the time. And so, like, that's how it kind of manifests later. So it kind of bummed me out that he didn't get that screen time, but there was a lot left out in the movie, which was okay.
Yeah.
You know, like, it would have to be, like, a 10-hour movie to get everything into it, so I'm happy with what they took out and what they kept in. I think they did a great job of that.
Yeah. It's really difficult going across media.
Yeah.
It's impossible to really summarize or, like, capture the feeling of what's going on from a book to a movie or vice versa.
Yeah. Especially with Stephen King. Like, he has so much to say. He has so much story in there that it's just, you can't get everything.
And that's why there's so many bad Stephen King adaptation movies.
They're finally giving him, like, the movies that he deserves, I feel like. Because the trailer for Gerald's Game looks fantastic. Oh, yeah. I'm so excited for it. And I haven't watched the trailer yet, but they just announced 1922 was going to be made into a movie. It's a Netflix movie, and it comes out at the end of October. And they just released the trailer today, and I haven't been able to watch it, but I have high hopes for it. I think it's going to be fantastic. But the director of it wants to remake Pet Sematary.
As you all know, Pet Sematary is my favorite Stephen King novel. So if they don't mess this up, I'm going to be so happy about this.
Yeah, well, he seems to have, like, an uncanny ability to understand what Stephen King is trying to get across. You know, I almost wonder, I don't know a lot about him, but I almost wonder if he's read a lot of Stephen King.
He'd better. Like, I would expect a director to read a lot of Stephen King if they're going to try to adapt any of his stories.
Yeah. He just gets that Stephen King feeling across so well. So I have high hopes for him. I'm just a little afraid that he's going to get, like, too in his head about it, you know? Like, look at me, I can make good Stephen King movies. And then he just kind of, like, goes off the rails. That's the only thing I'm worried about, but
yeah,
I don't know. I want him to remake Pet Sematary. I think it deserves a good remake, even though Stephen King probably just, like, wants it to disappear.
Well, yeah, that was one he threw out, like I said, because he owed him another book, and he was like, I told you so. And I kind of like that it saw the light, because it has no boundaries, and it's painfully truthful.
Happy birthday, Stephen King. 70 years old.
Thanks for haunting our nightmares. We really appreciate it. Like, in the most sincere way.
I remember when I was younger just thinking to myself, like, the day that Stephen King dies is going to be probably the worst day of my life. It's going to, because it's so ingrained in my personality at this point, it's going to destroy me, I think. It's going to be hard.
Well, he's never going to die, though, because remember we said we think he made that Faustian deal.
Yeah.
And he's just going to not die and just quietly keep living. And people are going to be like, wait, isn't Stephen King like 110 years old now? Like, what's up with that?
And then he's going to start writing under Richard Bachman again.
No one's going to remember that by that time. So he'll be in the clear.
So he'll be fine.
Maybe he'll fake his own death. We'll just have to watch, like good conspiracy theorists.
It's going to be so bad, though, because when he does die, there's going to be so many conspiracy theories, and I'm going to be in such denial that I'm totally going to be on board with them. Like, I'm not going to be able to accept it in the slightest bit.
We're going to have to do a whole episode about conspiracy theories surrounding Stephen King's death.
Yes, because you know there will be. There definitely will be. There'll be so many of them. There's going to be, like, a year after he dies, people are going to be saying that they saw him places.
And I'll believe them.
So sad.
No, he's still alive. God, what if he heard this and he was like, they're celebrating my birthday. They also just are they're ready for me to kick the bucket. They're just waiting. It's like,
oh, it's just such a sad thought. I don't know. It's something that, like, I've been scared of since I first started reading his books, is like the day that he's actually going to die.
I realized I've been just using his novels as a sort of safety blanket where I'm reading all his old stuff first. And then when he dies, I'll have a bunch of new Stephen King. And, like, for years, I can just go...
Oh, my God.
Pretend he's alive still. I feel like that's an awful thing to do. Like, you wouldn't do that to a relative, would you? Be like, you're gonna die, so I just...
Yeah. Well, I would recommend going and reading his memoir, because it's phenomenal. Have you read On Writing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I would think you would have. I read it when I was in high school, and I'm rereading it again, and it's so good. And if you really need, like, if you're a writer and you kind of need, like, a kick in the butt, but also at the same time support, just read the book. Just read it. Because seriously, like, he's not gonna lie. He doesn't lie to you, but at the same time, he's like, you just gotta do it, and you can do it. Just go do it. Pretty much the whole message of it.
So I work in our university writing center, and we were just talking about Kill Your Darlings the other day. Because we have a student who won't kill any of his darlings. And, we were talking about maybe using that concept a little bit more. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's so valuable to any writer. Yeah. And it's not, like, he will not bullshit you. And it's such a valuable thing. I also think he has the propensity to be a little bit, which wouldn't you, like, being so successful, just to be a little bit high horse-y.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say I don't agree with, like, there definitely varying writing skills. I love how he ties it into his personal story as well, and, like, the hardships he went through, self-caused and not self-caused. Like, I feel like that's, not just as people, but as writers, that's something we have to grapple with. So,
right.
God, that honesty is just always what's going to make the best instructor. It's always going to be the thing that drives students forward. So good for you, Stephen. Mr. King. I don't know. I would just like to go to one of his book signings.
Oh my God, or go to one of his tours or something. Just do it. You have to, like, prepare to buy those tickets, though, because, like, they go fast.
I imagine. He was in Chicago a few months ago.
Oh.
It was...
For Sleeping Beauties?
I think so. I don't know.
Okay. That's the one that I was going to mention. I was going to say that he's on tour right now for Sleeping Beauties, but... It's hard. It's hard to catch him when he's on tour, but I don't know if I told you this, but I did go see him when he toured.
No.
I didn't tell you
Did
that?
you get to meet him?
No, it's not like it wasn't a book signing or a meet and greet or anything. He was going around promoting End of Watch.
Was he speaking?
And he was just doing a book tour.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a speaking event, and he actually had one in Iowa City, and I was planning on buying the ticket in Iowa City, and I want to say that, like, I either found out about the ticket sale too late, or they did the ticket sale at a different time than I thought they were going to do, or something like that, I don't know, but they sold out within, like, 4 minutes for the Iowa City one, so, basically, like, I went on to, he was going to be in Omaha, and so I went onto the website, and I sat there for an hour at my computer waiting, and then once it was time for them to go on sale, I just, like, kept clicking, and my mom did the same thing, and we both, like, clicked on it, to buy tickets at the same time, and my screen came up saying that the tickets were sold out, and my mom got 2.
Oh,
so,
jeez.
Within a minute, it was one of his last tour dates. Yeah, so I went and I saw him, my mom and I went and saw him in Omaha, and it was really cool. I mean, he's such a good guy. He is so introverted, though. He was so nervous. He's a great speaker, but, like, you can tell that he's just somebody who's like, I'm not really into this kind of stuff. I'd rather just talk to you face to face, but, you know.
Yeah.
But he's just such a good guy, and that's what I love about him, too, is that he's not just a good writer, but he's a good person, too.
Yeah.
So
I definitely get that sense. Like, any person who posts more pictures of their dog on Facebook than they do of themselves, it just has to be a good person.
Molly, the thing of evil. She's so
Aww.
cute. Oh my goodness. I love her. Yeah, and if you don't follow him on Twitter, oh my god, you're seriously missing out. He's, like, the best person on Twitter as far as I'm concerned. I never thought I would say that about him. Like, if you told me years ago that Stephen King was going to be, like, the best person ever on Twitter, I never would have believed you. Oh my god. He's fantastic. He just says the best stuff. Usually about Trump. Did you know Trump blocked him on Twitter?
Oh, yeah, I know. I mean, he's just so snarky. And it's great. Like, his political burns are the best.
They're fantastic.
Every time he posts something, I just go, oh, God.
Well, when he found out that Trump blocked him, he was like, okay, fine, but Trump, you're banned from viewing it, and and all of these different things. It was really funny. Or, like, reading Sleeping Beauties and, like, all this kind of stuff. It was so funny. But he's fantastic. So, thank you, Stephen King, for just simply existing. I don't know. The horror genre just wouldn't be the same.
No, God, just think about it. What would it be like? We don't know.
It feels like he's been around for so much longer than he has. Like, sometimes I think that he's, like, a classic. And when I was younger, like, when I first started reading him, I thought he was, like, Lovecraft classic. I had no idea, no clue that he was, I mean, I didn't even know that he was still alive, actually, when I first started reading him. But that's how people talk about him, you know?
I think he will be. I don't know. Some people arguably, they put Anne Rice in with, like, Interview with the Vampire in with classic horror literature.
Mm-hmm.
It's because defining classic is, like, really difficult. It just means, like, enduring literature, and we can argue about that for a long time, but until time passes, no one's gonna know. Although I maintain, Stephen King's gonna be around in the horror genre for hundreds of years if we don't all blow each other up before then.
We're just gonna constantly be making Stephen King movies, just over and over and over again. I think that concludes our Happy Birthday Stephen King episode, even though pretty much every episode we have is a Stephen King episode. We'll see everybody next week. Again, without Rachel, unfortunately.
Next 2 weeks?
Oh, next couple weeks. Yeah, next episode. I'll just say next episode. Bye.
Bye.